My name is Senuli Wickramasinghe, and along with my partner, Chen, we will be discussing how GMO technology can solve the issues of world hunger through our research project, Harvests of Hope. Gizmos research project, we have chosen the second goal, which is zero hunger. The reason we chose this is because we understand and empathize with how large this issue truly is. Did you know that this hunger crisis affects nearly 90 countries worldwide? The food shortages and fertilizer prices puts millions of families at risk of starvation, being unable to purchase their needed foods. Ultimately, poor farmers struggle to plant crops due to rising costs. This is an increasing cause of the crisis. This issue impacts all who experience it. However, the effects are evident in women and children. Women and girls often eat last and least, worsening malnutrition in them more than it affects the older male population. Pregnant women further face higher miscarriage risks, mothers ultimately passing away during labor due to malnutrition and increasing fatigue. Babies and young children also lack essential nutrients for proper development, affecting and stunting their growth dramatically. There are various causes of this crisis, of which we hope to address during our research project. Firstly, climate change and extreme droughts have worsened food shortages over the past decade. In addition to this, pandemics such as the COVID-19 pandemic in 2020 added 161 more people to hunger statistics. Further, wars such as the Russia-Ukraine war in 2022 severely disrupt food supply, as 30% of global grain supply was cut off during the Russia-Ukraine war, and fertilizer and fuel costs soared, affecting global food prices. Civil wars and general poverty also affect this global hunger issue. Where are we focusing our research? We are focusing our research in Africa, which has the most countries that are suffering from this hunger issue. Since Africa is a large continent, we are focusing on three regions of Africa, which are the Sahel region, South Sudan, and Somalia. The Sahel region consists of 9 countries: Burkina Faso, Cameroon, Chad, the Gambia, Guinea, Mauritania, Mali, Niger, Nigeria, and Senegal. We have chosen this region as it has the largest population of people facing severe hunger, with a whopping 13 million people suffering from this issue. The primary drivers of hunger in this area is droughts and armed conflict. South Sudan was chosen as there's a whopping 7.1 million people facing severe hunger. The primary drivers of hunger in this area is civil war and historic flooding. Finally, Somalia was chosen as it has 6 million people facing severe hunger. The primary drivers of hunger in this region is droughts and floods, civil war, and rising food prices. Let's quickly look at the climates in these areas. The Sahel region has a semi-arid climate with low and erratic rainfall. It has high temperatures and frequent drought. South Sudan is a tropical climate with distinct wet and dry seasons, susceptible to floods and droughts. Somalia is an arid to semi-arid environment with minimal rainfall. It also has frequent droughts. To really make a difference, we must target the root of the cause. And yes, it is true, we cannot end a war or change the climate, which are two of the leading factors of this hunger issue. We don't have that power, unfortunately. However, we can solve some of these issues using science skills, specifically GMOs. So now, what exactly are GMOs? I'm glad you asked. GMO stands for genetically modified organisms, and it is basically when a specific gene that codes for a specific protein is extracted and fused into the genes of a different species in order for that species to express a specific phenotype. These traits can include resisting pests or having more nutrients in the crop, such as golden rice. GMOs are created through genetic engineering, which is changing an organism's genotype using biotechnology tools or techniques. Why don't we dive into that a bit more? Question goes to how GMOs are actually made. Well, through the Gizmo tutorials as well as additional resources, we are shown a step-by-step process of how GMOs are made and implemented in agriculture. For our research, we utilized the tutorial of genetic engineering, and this tutorial focused on how to create a crop that could resist pests. However, the step-by-step process is the same whether one would like to make the crop more nutritious or kill off pests. Firstly, the gene of interest must be identified before it is inserted into the crops. This is done by two steps. The first step is the initial identification test, which identifies what bacteria causes the wanted phenotype. Once the bacteria is identified, further tests are done, which is a clone-resistant test, which identifies the specific gene that causes this change. Afterwards, the promoter is chosen. Choosing the promoter is ultimately choosing where one would like the bacteria gene to be evident in the plant, whether it be the root of the crops, the stem, the leaves, etc. Consequent to this, the genome is inserted through insertion methods into the various calyces of the plant. These methods will be discussed in the next slide. The plants are then planted in the ground. Although this was not shown in the Gizmo tutorial, an additional step after the crops are planted is backcross breeding, which involves repeatedly crossing the new transgenic plant with breeding stock over and over again until you wind up with a new transgenic crop. For those who do not know what transgenic means, the definition according to the National Human Genome Research Institute is an organism or cell whose genome has been altered by the introduction of one or more foreign DNA sequences from another species by artificial means. Okay, that makes sense, but how are the genes even injected into the cell? Well, there are two types of ways the gene can be delivered into the nucleus of a cell, specifically into their genes. These are through gene guns, where gold coated in the trait of interest, otherwise known as the donor gene or the transgene, is shot into the nucleus of the cell with lots of force. This is best used for getting through plant cell walls. There are also injections, which, as it sounds, is where this gene is injected into the cell. But the process isn't that simple. It is not the gene that is injected into the cell. It is actually a bacterium that carries something called a vector. A vector is basically how the gene transports itself from the cell into the nucleus. The main types of vectors for GMO are plasmids, specifically agrobacterium. To break down these vocab words, plasmids are circular-shaped DNA strands that are an extra set of genes in addition to the bacterial chromosomes. Agrobacterium is a soil bacterium that naturally transfers a portion of its DNA into the plant cells. Now, how did these genes get into the plasmids in the first place? Well, through these genetic engineering tools, the gene of interest is inserted into the vector with the help of restriction enzymes that cut into the plasmid and allow for the gene to attach, as well as ligase enzymes which bond the plasmid and the gene together into one singular circular shape, as shown on the PowerPoint slide. Once this has occurred, the plasmid is regarded as a recombinant DNA or transgenic, as it contains DNA from various sources. Agrobacterium is a type of plasmid, and it is the main one utilized, as its genes can move outside the bacterium and infuse the plant cells with new genetic material. Viruses are also a vector and can transport and infuse the genes into the plants through scientists removing their DNA and replacing it with this transgene, then inserting it back into the plant's body. With that basis knowledge, we continued our research and found that there are 5 steps of agriculture of which we can use to fight world hunger. This is shown in the PowerPoint slide. So let's clarify, what are our solutions, our aims, and our goals? Ultimately, our solution is genetically modified organisms. Through this solution, we aim to reduce the prices of crops so local farmers and civilians can afford these crops. We also aim to increase the nutrition of crops, increase productivity, and make agricultural practices more eco-friendly and reduce pollution and carbon footprints. We have also ensured to apply our solutions so they adapt to targeted countries' climate factors. My partner Catherine Chen will expand on this through her explanation in the Analyze section.
Hi, my name is Catherine. I will be talking about our analyzation of crops that can possibly be GMOs in order to solve the issue of hunger. After our time researching and analyzing through our target region's climates, the factors causing the crisis, and the positive cycles, that five that we have provided in the previous slide, we consider three types of crops that is most possibly will help ending the hunger with solution of genetic engineering. The first crop is sorghum. It took sorghum around 3 to 5 months to finish the overall harvest cycle. And sorghum is suitable for GMO. It is because of its feature of drought tolerance. So with highly potential of secure food supply in extreme weather of regions such as Sahel and Somalia. It has pretty good heat resistance and can thrive in arid and semi-arid climates. It contains really good source of carbohydrate, fiber, and antioxidant nutrition. It also have wide adaptation to various type of soil, making it easier to crops than the other crops in Africa. However, we think that through GMO technology, it can be boost to these crops that making it adapt even better to the requirements of people in hunger issues. Um, so first thing, since it is pretty good at heat resistance, there is a very high chance to genetic modify relevant traits and making it survive longer period during the drought. And second, through the biofortification, it can possibly enhance its vitamin A, iron, and zinc, such as these um, nutrition factors that can hopefully deal with the issue of malnutrition and hunger together. And third is GMO's resilience to flood is quite important to help it to be adapt in the flooding situation. Like some flooding region have a historical flooding. Through this GMO technology will be pretty good adapt to those region and hopefully help to improve the overall hunger situation. Second crops that we think will be good to GMO is maize, which is corn. It takes corn around 4 months to finish the overall cycle of growing, which it took around 4 months to eat the corn after you plant it. And the reason why we think it is really suitable is first, its nutrition, the food nutrition. It is rich in carbohydrate and it's good to relieve from starving. Second, it is very high yield potential, which means it produces more food per unit compared to the other grains. Third is versatile usage. It's versatile usage, so it can be eaten in fresh or just cooked, or it can mix into flour or feeding animals. It's pretty wide use, pretty useful. However, it has some challenges facing, such as water demanding, which require higher rainfall that will be suitable to harvest in South Sudan, but not Sahel and Somalia. Therefore, we think this is a good point. We can cut it to genetic modify the drought tolerance to withstand the dry conditions of this crop. It is also a big threat to corn that the fall armyworm. Therefore, pest resistance is really important. We can use genetic engineering, specifically the BT GMOs technology, making crops release a specific types of protein that will kill the pests, which is a existing GMO technology that has already being applied pretty wide. Also, we can use GMO to enhance its nutrition, such as increase the protein, increase it to higher protein and vitamin A. And there's an example of this, which is golden corn. Our final and last crops that being selected to be possibly GMOs and can help solving hunger issue is cowpea, which is black-eyed pea. It takes it around 2 to 3 months to grow and be eatable, which is faster than the previous two crops. So the reason we select this is because its feature of drought resistance, like the sorghum we mentioned before. It can grow with very minimal rainfall. It's ideal for arid regions. Second, it is beneficial crops in nitrogen fixing. It can improve soil fertility and making it beneficial for crop rotation. It is also a very good source of plant-based protein. Some GMOs potential for these crops are first the pest resistance. So we can possibly achieve sustainability, eco-friendly, and increase the productivity through resistance in pests and using less pesticide. Second, it is increase the resilience to flood. So second, we can increase the resilience to flood. It could be adapt to more wider region that suffering in hunger because of flooding. Now here is our summary of the GMOs technology that we can possibly applicate on crops. So 3 crops: sorghum, prawns, and cowpea, in order to achieve the overall resilience of food sources and ensure secure food supplement and make sure they are all affordable. So 5 things. First is resilient to flood. Second, resilient to drought and heat. Third is increases nutrition, overall nutrition. And fourth, we hopefully can make them be insect resistant, increase its insect resistant, and use less pesticide. The last thing is shorten the crop's growing cycle, so making it more productivity, which will be mentioned in the afterward slide. So our first strategy of using GMO is tolerance to flood and drought. Scientists at University of Oxford and Sydney had discovered the structure of an enzyme that could possibly help control the oxygen in crops. So with this enzyme, the crops are able to survive the temporary periods of flooding by activating energy pathway so that they don't rely on air response to the low oxygen condition in water. So the reason why control oxygen in crops is really important to helps in during the situation of flooding. It is because things called root suffocation. So plant roots require oxygen to respiration, but when soil are like filled with water, is waterlogged, oxygen's level is dropping, it causing root cells to die, causing the cells in root dying. So managing oxygen's availability could help roots continue their metabolic functions, which keeps it alive for a while. What we think also the droughts can be probably applied with a very similar way. However, in contrast, we are not controlling the oxygens, we're controlling water. We want the crops itself can possibly lock water in their body and last for a period and could possibly help them processing the droughts. But there's other solution we're gonna be mentioned in the afterward slide that could also help. to resilient in droughts, which is shorten the crop cycle. We'll explain this later. So to our second strategy of GMO technology is pest resistance. Solution of a pesticide using and pest eating crops can be all solved with this GMO technology strategy. So there is an existing example of modified GMO modifier. It's called the BT bacteria pest resistant strategy. It is basically a process of borrowing a segment of genes from BT bacteria and insert it into the modified crops, which letting the crops can release protein that is toxic to some pests, but not harming the crops itself. It is simply like the idea of how chocolate is toxic to dogs but not humans. So to our third strategy, a possible solution to ensure food security is through this process of shortened crop cycle by the technology of GMO. So it can be avoid the loss during extreme weather such as flood and droughts through shorten the crop harvest cycle, especially in the grain filling and flowering. So this is basically a process of genetic modifying triggers early flowering and grain filling before the crops getting ripening in the growing stage, as you can see in the image. And how it works is it can be artificially select traits of like early flowering or faster grain filling in all the variation of the individual crops, or through genetic modify, regulate plants' hormone and fasten the cycle of growth. So this is our final and last GMO strategy we think is possible to apply on crops. It is increasing nutrition. Through genetic modification, select the traits of crops with higher nutrition, such as protein and vitamin. We can insert and create crops with higher nutrition, and it can benefit to overall hunger situation. So for cowpeas, we think that we can possibly create a higher protein, iron, and more fortified zincs. For sorghum and maize, we can increase its vitamin A. And there is actually an existing example, that successful example of GMO technology being applied in real life is the golden corn. So last things that should be awareness and the risks that should be mentioned to the possible change to environments of this GMO technology is, since these crops has been genetically modified for strong resilience against various environmental factors, there's actually a risk that they may become overly dominant and threaten native species. Therefore, it is important to regulate the production of GMOs and conduct through testing and experimentation the future over and over again before it actually being used in real life. However, it's still a possible solution through GMO technology.
Here is our project's conclusion. GMO can help solve hunger in Africa as it results in faster growing crops, which reduces harvest time, decreases exposure to climate risk, and reduces crop pricing. Disease-resistant crops is also a result of GMO, and it helps reduce crop losses from viruses and bacteria. Further, insect-resistant crops are also a product of GMO, making the crops insect-resistant, which can reduce the use of pesticide and herbicide, overall benefiting the environment, ultimately achieving sustainability and eco-friendliness. Further, GMOs can make crops drought and flood tolerant, helping plants survive in arid climates of Sahel, South Sudan, and Somalia. Finally, GMOs is consequent in nutrient-rich GMOs. improving food security and the health of those who consume the food. Overall, GMOs can help increase productivity, keep citizens healthier and full for longer, and help farmers enhance profit, therefore creating a positive cycle towards ending hunger. STEM skills that we utilized in this research project were, in the science section, genetic engineering and GMO technology method research. In the technology section, Gizmos simulation and tutorial, Gizmos simulation data, and researching information. In the engineering section, analyzing the issue, creating one or more types of crops that helps end world hunger through GMOs, and being able to explain the idea logically and clearly. And finally, in the math section, analyzing data according to Gizmo, data collection, and summary and analyzing of skills through researching. This is our bibliography. Thank you very much for listening in on our research project, Harvest of Hope.